Hi everybody. So this week we are going to dive more into the Good Calorie, Bad Calorie book. So this last part of the book, it's the longest part of the book also, is entitled Obesity and the Regulation of Weight. So it kind of explains how obesity is an iceberg. Whenever we talk about it, people just think, oh, it's exercise. Oh, it's just because you eat too much. And that's not even necessarily the case. It could be genetics. It could be something to do with economics. It could be something to do with really just everything, just something potentially going wrong in your body, some type of dysbiosis where you're not in homeostasis. So for this video, we're just going to kind of go into kind of the science, some clinical trials, and a few of the hypotheses around it. The science of obesity has been practiced for about 60 years. So it's very still new. Compared to a lot of other things that we've learned about. 60 years is not a long time. And it began with the hypothesis that overweight and obesity result from excess caloric consumption or inadequate physical activity, which again, not the case. A lot of studies that compare normal and overweight individuals actually suggest that those who are overweight eat fewer calories than those people of normal weight because they've been told for the past 60 years, oh, you're just eating too much and you're exercising too little, when in reality, you need those calories that you're losing through physical fitness to come back. So, unfortunately, obesity is conveniently also blamed on fast food by association. I'm sure that you've seen a ton of normal weight people that eat a ton of fast food, and you're like, how? I'm like, how? So, there's really no association there on that. The first international conference on obesity was in 1974, so not that long ago. And that would reveal that obesity is extremely common, and it's probably the most widespread form of malnutrition, which means that you are not getting the proper amounts of nutrition for your body. Versus the, oh, you're eating too much argument. So there's that. Anthropologists have reported that both nutrition and health declined rather than improved with the adoption of agriculture. So that is also something very interesting. Coming up a few weeks from now, I'm kind of going to go through the agricultural industry and kind of tear it down and build it back up in a different way to kind of just switch your mindset into agriculture and what it is, because we're really disconnected a lot of times from the agriculture, which is something that's really, really important when it comes to thinking about the foods that we're putting into our body. But that's for later. A lot of it was also on hunger control and believing that it was just a brain thing, where you just don't have that that mindset of, oh, I can't stop indulging, which also necessarily isn't the case. We have to remember that constantly high or low energy expenditures result in constantly high or low levels of appetite. So if you're burning a lot of calories, you're going to consume a lot of calories. If you're not burning a lot of calories, you're not going to consume a lot of calories. That's just the way that it is. The importance of exercise in weight control is less than might believe because it increases the energy expenditure due to exercise. So you're going to need to increase that food consumption. If you've ever heard, which I say all the time, the more you exercise, the more you need to eat. The more you eat, the more you'll actually see that weight loss because you're finally fueling your body the way that it's supposed to be fueled. So that is kind of where that comes from. Then they were talking about hunger as if it was willpower, rather than just a natural consequence of a physiological drive to replace whatever calories were expended. It's still kind of the accepted wisdom to attempt to absolve obese and overweight with the necessity to exercise and to restrain their appetites. Mostly this is to sell things. But that's really about it. They just want to sell you things. Don't believe it. Another kind of thing going on here is that when, I want to say 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when we had the whole low fat, no fat thing coming in. That's still the most widely recommended diet for overweight and obese individuals. There's actually no evidence linking obesity to dietary fat consumption, neither between different populations or in the same population. So keep that in mind. Our body just wants to stay at homeostasis, and that's it. So let's dive into a few hypotheses. So there are a lot when it comes to obesity. There are a lot because there are a lot of factors that go into it. So I'm just going to go over a few of those. If you've ever heard of the Thrifty Gene hypothesis, this is not true. It's pretty much like, oh, well, back in the day when we had to, and back in the day, I mean, caveman days, when we had to eat a vast amount of food for half the year and the other half the year we were starving. So we had to eat as much as we can and and gain weight. And then that weight would fall off because we would be eating for 6 months. Kind of like that starvation type of thing. If that were true, it would suggest that all we need to do was put like some rats in a cage with plentiful food and they would fatten up and become diabetic. Not the case. That did not happen. There's another hypothesis that obesity is just self-gratification, or it could be something biological like a hormone or an enzyme. Women gain weight, particularly fat, in pregnancy and after menopause, which suggests that sex hormones are involved as much or more than eating behavior and physical activity. So that's something to keep in mind. We also have the 3 basic physical types hypothesis. So that's going to be an ectomorph. That's like you're long and lean. You got your mesomorph, you're broad and muscular, and then your endomorph, you're round and fat. You cannot change from one category to another, whether you lose weight or gain weight. You will always be that physical body type. So that is another hypothesis. Again, nutrition is mainly hypotheses. Take them all with a grain of salt. Next one is the hypothesis of exogenous and endogenous. So it's an immoderate lifestyle. So exo, which is obesity is driven by external forces to the body or to the fact that some people seemed predestined to grow fat and stay fat, regardless of how much they ate or exercised, which is endo, driven by internal forces. So like your metabolism and your hormones and things like that. We also have the positive caloric balance overeating hypothesis that has like a defect, like there's a brain defect going on somewhere. And that unbalances the regulation of ingestion behaviors. So like how much you eat and how fast you eat and binge eating and all of that. There's an alternative hypothesis that proposes the primary defect is hormonal and metabolic. So in fat storage or burning of fat for fuel is in the body, not the brain. So that's kind of an alternative hypothesis that, like I said, hypotheses all over the place for obesity because no one knows. Overeating and inactivity, so hunger and lethargy, are side effects of underlying metabolic defects, not causes. So that's another thing, is a lot of things for obesity are like, well, this causes this, and this is, because of this. Meanwhile, they could be 2 totally independent factors. So that is something to keep in mind as well. There's a few more here. The hypothesis of hunger, satiety, and weight regulation. It means that obesity is caused by a hormonal environment, increased insulin or increased sensitivity to insulin that tilts the balance of fat storage and fat burning. The hypothesis also implies that the only way to lose body fat successfully is to reverse the process to create a hormonal environment in which fatty acids are mobilized and oxidized in excess of the amount that is stored. So if you have any type of insulin imbalance, this could be something that is causing your weight gain. So clinical trials. A few of these as well. They were done in men and they were also done in rats. Those are our main 2 forms of clinical trials. So there was a clinical trial done where they had, I believe it was men in a prison, and what was going on was they cut their calories back significantly. And what happened was, even though they warned the men after this clinical trial was over to not overindulge in these foods, they absolutely did, and they gained all the weight that they had lost back, if not more of the weight, because they were constantly ravenous, obsessed with food, obsessed with hunger. It was just all of the conversation was just about food because they were on such a strict diet that they ended up overindulging later, which is kind of how we see the yo-yo dieting happen like that. We also have with rats. So if rats were starved, they would lose weight, but they would still have more fat than normal rats. So if there was an overweight rat and a normal weight rat, and they starved the overweight rat would still have fat content because they lost muscle. They didn't just lose fat. So kind of what happens too is with rats, they discovered that they could induce deficiency diseases by feeding them refined grains and sugars. So deficiency diseases are also something that leads to malnutrition, which obesity is a form of malnutrition. So being deficient in all these vitamins and all these minerals is not helping your homeostasis. They also found that the hypothalamus regulated adiposity in rats, so your fat storage and where that goes. So that could also lead to brain things. And then it was also found, so there was another study for weight loss, but instead of restriction, they did higher protein, higher meat, lots of veggies type of diet. And that was actually something that was seen as very, very good. They didn't gain weight. They lost weight. They were able to eat the same calories, if not more calories, and getting all of their nutrients in from the extra meat and protein that they were eating. It was also found that weight loss increased when subjects divided their calories into 7 meals, which served to moderate their insulin resistance versus like 3 big meals a day. They had 7 smaller meals spaced out probably within 2 hours of each other. It's kind of another way. So this is kind of a long one. A lot of sciencey stuff in this one. Next week, we'll go over appetite, hunger, metabolism. We'll go over diets, and we'll go over fat.